Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our Salesforce Champion webinar. Today, we have a place where you can ask questions in the GoToWebinar panel. So great to have you all on the call. Today, we're going to be talking about using Salesforce for volunteer management. We have our guest speaker on the phone, Sally Goodyear from the Shore Trust, who will be also sharing their insight into how they use Salesforce for volunteer management. So we're really excited to have Sally on the call today. From our point of view with economic change, we've been doing Salesforce implementation since 2010 for charities, and we specifically focus on non-profits, helping them use Salesforce for fundraising, impact management, volunteer management, marketing, the whole sort of all of the business departments, if you like, of a non-profit. We have a specialist interest in social impact measurement, and we also place Salesforce super mums. We train mums in Salesforce into charities to help them work in-house on a Salesforce CRM. So they're all the different areas we're involved in. So we run these Salesforce webinars once a month, which I lead, to just really share insight and knowledge around using Salesforce. So previously, my background was working within a non-profit, and it was really through the benefit of seeing how other non-profits use Salesforce that I got the light bulb moment. I was like, wow, actually we can really use Salesforce in so many different ways, and we can build it out. That really kind of got me passionate about Salesforce, and then obviously created a whole career around it, working with non-profits and Salesforce. So these webinars are really to give you that benefit and that insight. So please do ask questions as we go through, but we try to bring really all our knowledge and information to this call today. So first off, I'd just like to ask about your motivations, I suppose, for being on the call today and why Salesforce volunteer management is of interest to you. So we find working with our clients that their motivations are quite similar in many ways. So they're either trying to improve communication with volunteers, trying to provide better support for volunteers, improve engagement levels, either around applications and retention or dropout rates. They're also looking at how they can improve team efficiency and data security. And that's one of the reasons why they look at a system such as Salesforce. And subsequently, that will then help reduce administration for the team, dropout rates of volunteers, and solve any communication issues that have become apparent with it. So I'd just like to do a quick poll where I'm going to launch a poll, and what that will do is ping up a message on your laptop to ask you what your motivations are for looking at Salesforce today. That just helps us understand what information we can provide to you better. So I'll just launch that now. It's distributing that poll. So if you can just respond by ticking the areas that are most of interest. Great. Okay, thank you. So overwhelmingly, it seems 57% have said improved administration and efficiency. 14% have said improved communication with volunteers. 40% improved volunteer retention, and 25% other. So it'd be interesting to know what the other are. Maybe people who said other could put that in the questions area. But it seems very much like improved admin and efficiency are the things that's driving people to look at this. So that's great, thank you. So let's talk through and unpack how you can improve some of these areas that you're interested in. So with volunteer management functions, these are all the areas that we find we help organisations with using Salesforce in different ways. The journey starts with the recruitment. You can produce online application forms where volunteers can input their information, and that information is then pushed into the Salesforce system. There's various ways to achieve that. Recruitment is always a big piece that we always do. When you've received a volunteer application, it then goes into an internal funnel where somebody will then quality check that, take references, do DBS checks, do interviews. There's a whole series of things that happen around quality checks. So many of our clients want to be able to use Salesforce to track all of those quality check processes and data and stamp check that things have been done. Maybe even include like an approval process there where it stamp marks and saves that data. Once somebody's been approved as a volunteer, they then move into a training stage. And so some of our clients have like an online LMS system where they might provide online training material. They might want track which training volunteers have been to, sort of track all of that compliance around training as well, whether they've got qualifications, etc. Every organisation is different, we find. They all need different things, but they'll all have some kind of support and training requirements. You then move into the matching of roles. Now, the matching of volunteers to opportunities, again, is very diverse for different organisations. So we've worked with organisations like the Shaw Trust, where there might be a series of sessions available that a volunteer can book into to help support and deliver. So it's quite structured in that way. Or we might work with other organisations where it's a one-to-one mentoring relationship. So a mentor is paired with a young person, for example, for a period of 12 weeks. And what they're doing is matching those two together in more of a paired relationship. We're not necessarily tracking each of the sessions, but maybe some of the feedback and information from that session, but it's managed in a different way. And the technology and the solution is definitely different. So there's a matching piece that tends to happen. There's then the support and recognition for that volunteer. So that might be a peer support community that you might offer to them within Salesforce, or it might be recognition where you can give people badges or qualifications for what they've achieved, particularly if you're working with volunteers that are progressing into work, for example. And then you'll move into feedback satisfaction, capturing all the feedback and awareness of people. So they're all the different ways that we can use Salesforce. So in terms of some of the clients that we've worked with a whole range of non-profit organisations, from international to local non-profits, using volunteer management. So the Shaw Trust, who's presenting today, I mean, they are a large charity working on a national scale, but we've certainly worked on a small scale with lots of different organisations. So the Bridge Renewal Trust, for example, is a small organisation, community organisation based in Haringey, and they use Salesforce to manage all their volunteer applications and submissions as well. So it's really down at that really small granular level to a national level that allows you to scale up. And I think that was one of the benefits that the Shaw Trust, that I'll let Sally obviously speak about, was about being able to use all of that opportunity, use the Salesforce for those different opportunities. So all of these different organisations, every one of their volunteer management systems has been built differently because they all need different requirements and different things. And so really there isn't a one size fits all. I think if any of you looked at Salesforce, for example, there is something they called Volunteers for Salesforce, which is an off-the-shelf volunteer management solution. It's very much, that particular solution is very much suited to organisations where you might have set sessions that people then book into, and it's some of the features that offers, the Shaw Trust, Sally will talk about, because they do use that architecture. But certainly for some of our other clients that you'll see here, they have had more custom built objects in Salesforce to really mirror their Salesforce processes, or their volunteer management process, and Salesforce Volunteers for Salesforce wouldn't have fitted their needs. So with Salesforce, it's just being mindful that there is a product that is on offer around volunteer management, but that is one way that you can use Salesforce, and it is useful for an organisation that lends itself to that sort of structure. Whereas you can build out Salesforce to really manage volunteers in any way you might want to, and to give you the relevant data. And that really moves me on to my next slide, which is around real-time data analytics. Now, with a background in impact measurement, it's really, this is what I get excited about, is the data that you can see coming out of Salesforce. So what we talk to a client about is, well, tell us about your journey of managing volunteers, how you collect applications, how do you then, quality check them, how do you train and support, and how do you match them, and let's just understand all of that, and then decide on which is the best technical solutions to go on to. And I'll come on to those technical options later down for this presentation. Some of the KPIs that you might think about collecting in terms of key performance indicators that you want to review, is I've put some examples here that are things that were commonly sort of asked for by clients. So if we were looking at recruitment of volunteers, you'd want in Salesforce the ability to be able to see quickly and easily in a dashboard type view with graphs, like number of applications and what stage those applications are at, number of interviews, number of training hours provided, and to start to understand the average length of recruitment process through some of that data. And then you can understand the number of active volunteers you've got, You might be able to track the equality information around volunteers. That particularly will have to obviously be in context with GDPR guidance now about whether you can collect that data at the individual level. But also you might want to start tracking the motivations of volunteers and their goals. And we've particularly worked with some charities that have been funded by government before, where they've been really interested to know whether this volunteer has volunteered for the first time, like have they volunteered previously anywhere else, because that was seen as an indicator of, we've increased volunteer rates, or we've increased number of people volunteering. And that is for the government a sign of, one, improving the number of people volunteering overall, but also it contributes to health and wellbeing outputs, that there are national indicators that show if people start volunteering, then their health and wellbeing will improve. So it's an interesting statistic, and the recruitment of volunteers is all, one dashboard in its own right. As you move through the journey, other analytics that you might start to look at is the outputs of volunteers, which is about the number of hours of support they've provided, which might be then calculated as an in-kind value. So in-kind values are calculated in different ways, well, by different funders. So you might do it based on your average wage in the areas you work, or you might be given a specific scale of salary brackets for in-kind value. So again, different people do that in different ways. But if you were to say to a funder, well, look, this year we've had this many active volunteers, they've supported this many beneficiaries with this many hours of support, they're all the typical types of outputs you might track. And then you've got the outcomes for volunteers themselves. So I appreciate this isn't relevant for all charities, but some charities have volunteers that they're actually then helping them improve their own sort of employability prospects. So you might want to track the outcomes around their personal satisfaction as being a volunteer, whether they have achieved any new skills or qualifications, improved their health and well-being, or whether it's helped them with career progression or progression into other further education and training. So you've kind of got 3 levels of data analytics just from those sort of key areas. And then if we look wider, this is obviously all based on the fact that you collect this data in the CRM, is you can look at some wider outcomes. So you might want to look at whether your organisation has grown as a result of the volunteers being included. So if you've started to recruit volunteers, has that allowed you to scale up the number of beneficiaries you support? Has it allowed you to scale up your services? Or has it helped you increase and secure match funding? So they're the other types of outcomes you might look at. Or you might want to look at the impact that the volunteers have had on your beneficiaries, for example. So you might want to start collecting feedback from the beneficiary to say, well, how has our volunteers helped you? Have they helped you achieve personal goals or had a positive experience? And maybe you can start looking at trends about which volunteers are actually most effective at supporting beneficiaries than others, because maybe that volunteer has certain skills. So maybe they've been trained previously as a coach or a mentor, and so that person might be having a greater impact on their beneficiaries they're working with, as opposed to perhaps another volunteer who hasn't had that type of training. So you can start to perhaps see trends in the beneficiary outcomes as a result of the volunteer interaction, and start to sort of look at some of those characteristics. Or you could look at some other positive beneficiary outcomes that are attributable to volunteers. So there's 2 areas here, engagement and outcomes. That really is all about how are the volunteers interacting with those beneficiaries in different ways, and whether the volunteers actually help that beneficiary achieve specific outcomes. So there's lots of data that gets collected through application forms, through feedback forms, through support records, that you can then roll up that data to give you both quantitative and qualitative sort of data analysis. How do you get there? So in terms of approach to CRM implementation, so once you've decided everything that you want to do with your CRM, so obviously reflect on all the bits that I've just talked about. It's like, what do we actually want our system to do for you? It's great if you can just document that down and go, right, this is what we need a system to do. So that's define your data requirements, define what you want the system to do for you, define what data it's going to give to you, and you're halfway there, basically. That's sort of the hard bit, if you like. Once you've clarified exactly what data you want, what your processes are as well, because when you start thinking about a CRM system, Obviously, a Salesforce system can give you improved things like automation. So if somebody applies, it automatically pings an email to that person to say thank you for your application form. So you will define potentially new processes and new ways of working using the Salesforce technology. So once you've done that, then you can track all that in a system and obviously build the system to do it and deploy then different data capture tools to help you capture this data. So the benefits of all of this, if you use a CRM system for, the big picture, if you like, of all the different elements of volunteer management, is that you get to then see what we talk about as a 360-degree view of contacts. So if I looked at Joe Bloggs, who's a volunteer, I could see everything that we've ever done with Joe, whether his application, when he had his application form, what volunteering he's been involved with, how many hours he's done. And then you can start to award them to say, well, actually, we've seen you've done 100 hours of volunteering. Thank you very much. And you can give them a badge and send them a certificate and make them feel special. So having everything in one place gives you that real ability to have more intuitive client relationships, because you can really understand who are really interactive and invested volunteers. And for those that aren't, you can think about perhaps potentially ways to re-engage them and get them involved in things. Having all this data improves team visibility. So your team have an awareness about who's last interacted with who, when they last had an email, when they last had a phone call, and allows better team working overall. So that's where you get the reduced sort of administration, if you like. And then with all of that data, you get the real-time analytics, which I've shared some of the key things you can do there. And then you've got improved security of data. So mindful of a whole GDPR conversation, you would want to make sure that your volunteer data is locked down, but also you have got consent from them for you to hold their data, and that you actively look to collect that consent going forward, in each year, for example, if you need to renew that consent, or if they're opting into email communication, you've got that information in there as well. So some of that consent will be done through maybe a volunteer contract that you might have with that person. Again, you've got to think about ways of sort of managing consent, but holding data securely is all part of that package. So in summary, just to sum up what we've talked about here, within a Salesforce system, you might have volunteers that connect, if you like, to maybe programs that you run or contracts, or you might have different partners that give you volunteers. So what Salesforce allows you to do is to build an architecture that allows you to relate volunteers to different sort of entities that are going on, or different services that you're delivering at any point in time. So you can track all the recruitment information that we talked about. You can track the allocation of volunteers across areas. You can track support to volunteers that's been provided. And then you can track all the outcomes that have been achieved. And all of this information can be attributed and related to these different, these are examples, so you might call them projects or programs, contracts, and sort of be able to create a dashboard that gives you the big picture about how many volunteers you've recruited this year as an organisation. But then what you can start to do is filter it down to show, well, how many volunteers have we recruited for this specific program, or this specific contract? So you can start to break that data down and filter it into more specific areas of your organization. So that's what we're trying to achieve with this. So on technical solutions, we talked about Salesforce CRM is obviously the heart of this conversation, and you might build out Salesforce to either use the Volunteers for Salesforce app, or you might build out and customize it to have custom objects that manage all your volunteers, depending on your use case. Now, beyond that, you can then add in a range of other technical options that allow you to add value to your overall implementation, and particularly to sort of reduce administration and improve efficiency as well. So if I start from the left, we've got online forms. So online forms are typically used either for volunteer applications, volunteer feedback about their experience as a volunteer, but also feedback about maybe the work that they've been doing with a particular beneficiary, for example. And so online forms, you've got different ways to do that. You can use typical like web to lead, web to case forms. You can use visual force forms. You can use third-party apps like Form Assembly or Click Tools, for example. So there's different ways you can build online forms that allow you to expose a form on your website or send a form via an email to somebody where they complete it and the data is pushed into your Salesforce instance. So again, the different type, the technology solution you would use for online forms will differ depending on your overall requirement. You've then got offline forms. Now, there's only one solution that we know about called Formulae that is an offline form solution at the moment, and they specialize in having an offline form that you could use on a tablet or a phone or your laptop. If you're out on site and you've not got mobile access, the data can be put into this form and it can be pushed into Salesforce when it syncs. So you've got that option. The next option is actually giving users, like your volunteers, CRM access. So for a couple of our clients, including Assure Trust, they give out community licenses to their volunteers, which means the volunteers can log into a secure environment and can access and update information within that community, within the CRM directly. Now, obviously, it's locked down, so that volunteer can only see information that's of relevance to them, but they can input, various information in there. So it's not about giving online forms somewhere, it's then about sort of more about giving access to an online area. And the benefit of the community license is also you get the benefit of Chatter and some additional functionality in community where you can create like an online forum, create an online resources section, and have a whole sort of community area which can be of value for supporting volunteers. Now, if these volunteers or indeed your staff are then working out and about, that then, you can then look at options like having Salesforce on your mobile and tablet and being able to sort of have that more accessible in that way. You can look to integrate it with your website, so you can have website interaction. Depending on your website platform, there's obviously different ways to achieve that as well. So we've done a website integration webinar, which you can watch by looking at our website. So you can look at all the different ways you could integrate with a website, but that's definitely an option. If you're emailing volunteers and sending them newsletters, etc., you might want to look at an e-marketing solution. So you might want to look at Pardot, which is a Salesforce product that is the most integrated e-marketing solution, but that can tell you how engaged volunteers are in your service. So it would also, with Pardot, it also tracks website behavior. So if I had Joe Blogs as a volunteer in my system, I'd be able to also see that Joe's clicked on our website 10 times in the last month and start to give me that information as long as they've accepted cookies. So it starts to track IP information. So Pardot is an advanced e-marketing tool with advanced analytics about customer behavior. Otherwise, you can integrate other e-marketing solutions with Salesforce, which have less of an integration, but there's different options there. And then the final bit on here is around online training. So if you want to have a learner management system within your Salesforce CRM, there are various ones that integrate with Salesforce. We found the best one that integrated was one called Litmus, which we use for our Salesforce Supermums program. But by all means, you might want to go out to the marketplace and look at different options. One of the key things for us is that we wanted an LMS system that would be accessible within the CRM community. So if volunteers have a CRM license where they can log in, that Litmus would be within there and contained within that environment, rather than the volunteer having two logins, like one to an LMS system and one to Salesforce. So when we work with our Salesforce Supermums, who are trainees and volunteers for us, they can log into a community, but they can also access Litmus LMS within that whole community as well. So that's just something to be mindful of. So you want to make it easy for your volunteers. You want a one-stop place where they can come to manage their information, and the Salesforce community is one of those things, as well as all these other sort of technical options that we've talked through. All of this is then presented looking at sort of an example dashboard here about number of volunteer hours, the rating of the volunteer experience. If you get all this data in here, then you can get some really great dashboards coming out of it. So I'm now going to hand over to Sally to really just share her journey of using Salesforce over the last couple of years. So give me a minute. Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So, I'm going to talk you through the journey that we've been through over the last few years, actually. I think we started in 2016 actually using Salesforce, and the scoping and the development phases obviously happened prior to that. So it's been a journey, but it's been a good one. And just to give you a bit of information about SureTrust, especially if you're not that familiar with us. So as an organisation, we are a fairly large charity, and as Heather said, and we provide services that help people live more independently and engage really in their society and in family life more effectively. And we've got a vision whereby we hope that we can reach a society where everyone has the opportunity for inclusion, independence and employment. So as an organisation, last year we had just over 1,400 volunteers, and they delivered just over, again, 150,000 hours for us. What I'm really pleased about is that now that we've got Salesforce in place and we're tracking all of our data and our volunteers and our information through the system, I can say that with absolute confidence. There's no equivocation there. There's no, we're thinking we've got this many volunteers and we think they've done this many hours. That is absolutely information that we're able to track now. So that's been a major improvement and a major step forward. So the volunteers that we've got support in lots of different ways. And again, we needed a system that would enable us to track all of these different types of support that the volunteers deliver. They help within our employability services, wellbeing services, shops, schools, social enterprises. We have justice contracts, the list goes on. And in all of those different services, they support in different ways. So we also wanted to be able to track exactly what each volunteer is doing, when they're doing it, how they're doing it, and then measure the impact of what they're doing. So we had quite a big ask when we approached Heather to adapt the system for us. The volunteer program that we've got has got three key principles, which any organisation who involves volunteers is likely to have similar principles that support the program. So the first is that it's based on skill sharing. So that can work two ways. A volunteer can come to us and share their skills with our clients directly, either through coaching or mentoring or advice and guidance, or a volunteer could be coming to us to gain skills. So certainly within our retail arm, we have lots of volunteers who come and give their time, but they also would like to pick up some skills which will hopefully help them become more employable. We also wanted to be able to track that within the system because, again, impact measurement's really important, and we want to make sure that the offer that we're providing our volunteers serves the purposes and the motivations that they come to us with. So that, again, is something that Salesforce is supporting us to do. They all add value to our services. There's no two ways about it. So whether they're bringing experience to the table and sharing that with clients, or whether they're helping us to fundraise through volunteering in our shops or running marathons or fundraising for us, they always add value. And the last principle behind the program is that obviously we would never look for volunteers to replace paid staff. So again, that added value element comes into play whenever we look at a volunteer role. We ask that question. And that's something else that Salesforce is helping us to track, is when a request comes in, being a large organisation with lots going on, lots of services, people come to us all the time as the national team saying, could we have volunteers do this for us, do that for us? We always have that kind of litmus test of whether or not this is a pure volunteer role, or whether we think actually they're trying to get some tasks done that actually staff should be doing, or we should be paying somebody to do. And Salesforce really helps us to control that and keep track of that. So that's been useful too. We also work with companies, as per lots of organisations, because companies are happy to volunteer and give their staff an opportunity to go and use some time with an organisation. So last year we had over 500 volunteers come to us through 30 different companies, some of these, as you can see on the screen, and they offered over 3,000 hours of time to our clients. So again, I can give all of that information very confidently because I know it's all been tracked. And it's also about, obviously, with these companies having that two-way process of them learning from us as much as we learn from them. So they bring their expertise in and share that with clients, but we get lots of feedback from the company volunteers about how valuable it's been for them to see and speak to people who perhaps they wouldn't normally have contact with, and especially around the employability element of the services we deliver. It's great for companies to see what pool of talent is out there and available that they might be missing, especially if their application processes are not inclusive. So yeah, it's great again to be able to track the hours and the volunteers, but also some of the impact in terms of the sessions that we run. In terms of the starting point, I guess, for us deciding that we wanted to introduce a volunteer management system, we had to identify the problems that we were aiming to solve. So first of all, and I know that having spoken to colleagues in other organisations in the same role as me, that this is something that lots of us have suffered from. The first thing we wanted to avoid were what I call data disasters. So prior to having the Salesforce system, we had the old-fashioned way of recording all this information, which was good old Excel. And we had spreadsheets everywhere. We had to bring them all together on a regular basis, and that took time in terms of actually dissecting that data and understanding what information we could pull from it. That was always limited, of course, as well. And then you had the added issues around spreadsheets crashing or corrupting and things not working as they should, all of which took a heck of a lot of time. We also wanted to better improve or make better our engagement between volunteers. We, as I say, large organisation, lots of different services delivering out of different geographies. And in many cases, the volunteers, especially those that were coming in to do the client-facing roles, weren't necessarily seeing other volunteers on a regular basis because they were all coming in at different times and doing different activities. So we wanted to connect them better and enable them to talk to each other. So that was where we introduced the community that Heather mentioned earlier, so that they could connect online and we could also disseminate information out to them through that community as well. And then the last problem that we wanted to solve was the impact measurement. So making sure that we were able to measure the impact of the different volunteer roles and also get feedback on how things were going through the system as well for those individual volunteers. So those were the three key problems that we wanted to solve. The other issue that we had as an organisation, and this probably is fairly unique to larger organisations like ours, was that we as an organisation deliver government contracts, and one of the major issues with that is that security and data security is incredibly tight, quite rightly so of course, but it is incredibly tight. We actually had 18 different systems when we looked at Salesforce. We had 18 different systems within the organisation which were helping us to track our client activity, so the interaction between staff and clients and the journey that clients were on within whatever contract or service we were delivering. So all of those systems sat separately. Some of them we owned, some of them we didn't. We work with partner organisations a lot, and some of those systems were owned by the partner organisations. So when we looked at what we could use to manage our volunteer programme, we couldn't tap into any of those 18 systems. There were either data security issues in place or we didn't own the system, so therefore it would have been impossible. And of course, the other issue with that is you would then have to manage 18 different systems for one element of your organisation. What we wanted was one system to manage the volunteers who were going out to all of these different contracts, so to flip it on its head, if you like. Of those 18 systems as well, there was no volunteer access at all. Again, because of data security, only staff or paid employees were able to access them. So that really limited us on what we could do with the volunteers in terms of maybe having some lead volunteers who could help us with management of the program and bringing other volunteers together for peer support, etc. And it also meant that we were restricted in terms of them being able to enter any data or information or impact measurement information into those systems. So we needed something that sat separately, which the volunteers could get into, and we could get that through from them straight away. And we also needed a secure system. As I've already said, delivering government contracts, all of your systems have to meet some really tight data security criteria, and Salesforce met that. So we looked at the level of encryption that we could get through Salesforce, and we also looked at the data storage offer within Salesforce as well. And one of the key criteria on that front for us was that it had to be EEC based, and Salesforce do offer that. They will not offshore your data as such if you request them not to. So that was really helpful. The other reasons we chose Salesforce. So as with scoping or choosing any systems, large systems, we went through a long process of research to see what's out there, see what's available, talk to other organisations who were using systems, and that sort of led us down our decision route to choose Salesforce as the system we wanted to use. I think some of the key reasons why that choice became apparent was because we had a chief information officer at the time who was very au fait with introducing new systems, and Salesforce was definitely one of his recommendations on the list of systems that we had looked at. I guess we're lucky, we're a large organisation, we have that sort of expertise in-house. I think if you don't, then it's definitely worth going out and talking to other people and getting other people's advice and opinions. And you might want to approach the British Computing Society, because they have members who've done data and systems jobs throughout their career, and they're really happy to come and volunteer for charities and share that expertise and that experience. So that might be a way of getting that advice and getting that guidance if you don't have it in-house. Another reason we chose Salesforce was because it speaks to other systems very easily. So where we had these 18 other data management systems in place, we wanted to make sure that if at any point we needed Salesforce to talk to them, i.e. draw data through to them or push data back through to Salesforce, that was going to be possible. So Salesforce can do that. So that was one of the key reasons we chose it. We also wanted a really adaptable system, so something that we could adapt to use to manage the volunteer program in the way we wanted to use it, but also adapt it to use in other parts of the organisation as well. Fundraising being one of the key areas for us, and that was definitely possible with Salesforce. So it's very much malleable to what you need it to do. It appealed to us as well that it's a widely used system. If you mention Salesforce when you're out and about talking to not-for-profits, talking to profitable organisations, talking to anybody, especially commercial, Salesforce is recognised. It is a system that people know, and it is a system that people use. And I think from our side of things, we wanted that because we wanted to be able to recruit people into the organisation who already had Salesforce experience, so that when we need to replace staff who are going to be using the system, that isn't going to be a difficult thing to find. And we also wanted to make sure it was a system that's widely used, so that when our staff learn to use it, that's another string to their bow, and it's another part of their professional development that they can say on their CV and so on, that Salesforce is a system they're familiar with. So that works both ways. The other thing that really appealed to us was that Salesforce, once you have commissioned it, offers free online training, which is really effective. And it's called the Trailblazers program. And many of my team have used it to upskill themselves on the system. It's delivered in really nice bite-sized chunks, applicable pretty much to whatever version of Salesforce you've got, in terms of the principles are taught through the Trailblazers, and then you can see how that's applied to your system and how you use it, and you can track progress through that learning as well, and prove that learning, if you like, through certificates and so on that you can download once you've completed modules and passed the little quizzes at the end. So that has been really invaluable, and as I say, lots of my staff have done it and they found it really useful. And then there was a couple of benefits that have kind of come up since we commissioned Salesforce. So we didn't know this beforehand, but it's probably worth mentioning. So Salesforce have been really good to work with, I have to admit. They have hugely responsive. I think sometimes when you're dealing with these massive companies, you wonder just how responsive they're going to be, and also how helpful they're going to be if you've just got some niggling little questions. And they've been brilliant. I've sent them questions that I probably could have gone and looked up if I'd really trawled through the website and the bits of information they've got there, but they're, no problem at all, just pinging a quick email back saying, oh, this is how you find out this, or this is how you do that. So they've been really good in that respect. And they also now volunteer with us once a month as well, which is brilliant. So they run a workshop for our clients in their swanky London offices, helping people who want to start up their own business. So that's been an added bonus that we weren't expecting at the start. So just to run you quickly through the journey, and I'll just mention some of the things that Heather talked about earlier in terms of that journey. So as Heather mentioned, obviously one of the biggest stages is to create that wish list of what you want the system to be able to do. And for us, it was about that better data management efficiencies, managing time better, also having an online booking system for the volunteers so that when they are booked in to see clients on a one-to-one basis or run sessions, groups, workshops, etc., we can have all of that information in the system. Have an online community for the volunteers to communicate with each other, and also have that impact measurement. So that was our kind of key wish list. We obviously got input from other people for that wish list. So making sure that we talked to other people in the organisation about what they wanted the system to do, and also going out to our volunteers. And I think that's really crucial to involve as many people as possible in that kind of scoping phase, so that you get the solution you need rather than one that you think you need. You then obviously have to look at the pounds and see how much budget you need to allocate to it. And there will be some initial investment, and then there'll also be the ongoing investment that you need to maintain the system and keep it going post-development phase and go live. I'm more than happy to talk to people about actual pounds and pence at any point. If you wanted to contact me after today's session, that's fine. I'll share contact details at the end. I won't go into massive detail now, but yeah, you obviously need to allocate that budget. We also put in a project manager for the kind of scope to go live phase, because we felt, being a larger organisation and needing to use it in so many different facets, we would need somebody to really kind of focus in on this. It wasn't their whole job, but it was a big chunk of their job at the time. And it made a big difference. It meant that we didn't derail, and it meant that we got to where we needed to be within the time frame that we set. And we also now make sure that we always have somebody in the team, in my volunteers team, who is Salesforce administrator trained. So they own the system as such, and they're able to make small changes to it. And they also manage and keep the dashboards up to date and get the reports out from it. So that's really helped as well in terms of making sure the system works for us. So what are the benefits? So one of the key things that we've seen is that we grew our volunteer numbers by 31% in the first year that we used Salesforce. And I think that was largely down to being able to process those volunteers more efficiently and more quickly, having a really effective online application process, which was automated in parts as well, and also being able to handle the number of inquiries. So the data processing is now scalable, and I feel confident that as we grow our volunteer numbers more and more, that won't be a problem for us, and it won't be a massive time or resource issue. So that's really helpful and what we wanted. The reporting functionality is second to none. I'm not a massive systems person, but I can navigate the reporting function really easily. So if I can do it, anybody can. And these nice dashboards are produced as well, which are really nice to be able to see which of your staff members, as you can see at the bottom right there, I've got one that tells me which of my team members have certain volunteers within a contract, and we've got graphs and dashboards that show us how many active volunteers we've got at any one time in certain roles. And then we've also got the community as well, which is the volunteer side of things, which is the bottom left image there. And that, again, has been massively helpful for the volunteers to be able to log in and manage their availability, check their bookings, and also communicate with each other. So the other wider benefits that we've noticed, obviously the time-saving element, that's been huge. And the staff, my team, have all commented on that throughout, is that they feel like they're far more efficient now in terms of being able to track their volunteers and what they're doing with them. It's from a management perspective, it's great for compliance. We get audited regularly by our internal commercial assurance team, and we also get audited externally by investing in volunteers. And it's just really helpful to be able to present the data and the information very easily in a slick manner and be able to show them the audit trails that they need to see to evidence that we're doing what we say we do. Having those accurate records is a bonus as well. Being able to say with absolute confidence how many volunteers you've got, how many hours they've done and what impact they've had is just massive. And we're not quite there yet. We've still got a ways to go on the impact measurement side of things, but we are definitely getting there, and that's so nice to be able to talk about it with absolute confidence. One of the other big hot potatoes at the moment is GDPR within the sector and within every sector, I think, at the moment, in terms of getting ready for it and making sure that you meet that May the 25th deadline. And what I've noticed is that obviously where we've got all the records on Salesforce, it's been really simple to update the system so that it's GDPR ready itself. So going forwards from the 25th of May, we're collecting those privacy notices without any problems, and that we are having to go out to our existing data objects to tell them that we've got their data and issue those new privacy notices. That's been so straightforward through Salesforce. And we've got a direct comparison in-house, actually, in that some of our retail outlets still have quite a paper-based system at the moment. We're going to be working with them this year to get them all onto Salesforce. But the pain that we've had to go through for GDPR with those paper-based sites is so much more than what we've had to go through with the ones on Salesforce. So yeah, in terms of time efficiency, again, huge. And just being able to face a project like that without feeling daunted has been really nice. And then you've got that benefit of communications and being able to reach out to the volunteers. So the community, we can send information out. We don't have to send as many e-newsletters and emails and so on. We can do it through the groups and the chat functions within the community, within the online community. And them being able to talk to each other has been massively invaluable as well. And they've already started to feed back on that and say how helpful and useful it is a lot of the time. So those are some of the, the sort of wider benefits that we've noticed. I guess the other thing as well, and this again is something that's been a hot potato in the sector recently, is around being able to track anything if you need to do an investigation, particularly around things like safeguarding or volunteer conduct. Absolutely, we've been able to look at those records and gather that information in a really short space of time, because the communication that you've had with that volunteer is all recorded in the system. The process that you've taken them through from application to being an active volunteer is all in the system. So whereas previously you might have spent hours and hours gathering all of that evidence, now it's a really simple case of just seeing all of that in front of you on the screen. So that again has been a huge benefit. So yeah, those are some of the wider benefits. And that is a very whistle-stop tour of the journey that we've been on.
Great, thanks, Sally. No, that was really good insight. I hope that's given you all the wide range of ways that Salesforce can be used. And as I say, it was really valuable to me at the start of my Salesforce journey 8 years ago to kind of get that insight and get understanding from somebody who's been on that journey as well, to kind of talk you through, what the options are, how you can do it. And I think, as I say, the first step is really, document your requirements first. If you're going to go out and get support from a consultancy partner, be clear on what it is that you want and how you operate as a team, because then that helps a provider put together the best type of proposal for you, which is more in line with your estimate costs. So we find traditionally that any sort of CRM implementation isn't less than 4.5K. That's our minimum implementation period now. We also offer through our Salesforce Supermoms program that you'll see on the slides, we charge a client, a charity, 6 paid days, and then they get 6 days for free implementation. So you get 12 days basically of an implementation for the price of 6. So we've had 36 mums through the program so far. We've got a new cohort starting of 10 mums on Monday. So we do implementations once a quarter. So every quarter we'll start a project and finish it with a mum being involved in it. So that's available for projects where it is suitable and the work that needs to be doing is suitable. For some of the work that we did with Assure Trust, for example, it's more complex development work that we had to do for those types of projects, so that wouldn't have been suitable for a trainee, certainly not the whole project. So it's worth flushing out what you need it to do, talking through somebody the different ways that you can achieve it. And we're always obviously happy to provide a quote for any work that you need for an implementation, or certainly support and training. But thanks very much for your involvement today. Thanks for joining. Thanks again, Sally. Thanks everyone for joining.
Problem.
And have a great day.